So let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to give a little intro here. Our topic today is camp evolution, change, and transformation. What does this mean, and why is it important to recognize it, welcome it, work with it? Maybe we can think of our camps as living, breathing entities that are naturally going to evolve over time, like many communities and projects do. We can think of them possibly as following a journey, maybe beginning with a spark of inspiration, those early days filled with energy and possibility. This may flow into a period of growth where your camp finds its footing and expands its reach. Eventually, it may settle into maturity where established practices and deep connections take root. Sometimes a camp may face a period of decline, but this isn't the end. Throughout this journey, camp leads and campers alike will need to adapt their approach and tackle new challenges and respond to changing needs of their environment and themselves. So today, with our panelists, Big Bird from I Love Elephants, Impulse and Wheat Thin from Joby, Coffee, Tea, or Me, Puppy from Religious as Fuck, Fox from Whiskey and Dust, and Vesper from Primal Oasis will be exploring, how their camps have evolved and engage our panelists and you, our participants, in a discussion that aims to get you thinking about where your camp is in its life cycle and offer some strategies to keep your camp vibrant and moving towards its goals. So I'd love to introduce our first panelist, Big Bird from I Love Elephants. To learn more about Big Bird, check out the bio in the chat. So we just dropped that, his bio in the chat. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about him. And welcome. And where are you calling in from today, Big Bird?
Yeah, well, good morning. I'm from Bali right now. I live in Bali most of the year, but originally our camp is based out of Bend, Oregon, normally. So you see the backdrop here. This is real time. So yeah, I'm Big Bird. I run I Love Elephants camp. It's on the Esplanade at 430. We have almost a whole acre there. And I'm so humbled to be given the opportunity to present for your chat. I really feel privileged on this. I love a little recognition. Our camp has been working hard for a long time. I'm a 23-year burner, and the last 10 years or 12 years maybe running I Love Elephants camp. And so you'll learn. In about a minute here, I'm going to encapsulate what we're about. Our camp's evolved from far back in the camping area all the way to the Esplanade. And when we were first given the Esplanade location a couple of years ago, I felt like we got it. Finally, we got what we have been striving for so many years. We're a camp of about 75 people. We're kind of a yoga-based. I co-produce. I'm one of the producers of Bhakti Festival at Joshua Tree. We support that and other festivals in America. We raise money from our different yoga events to fund our programs in Asia, where my organization, a nonprofit, saves Asian elephants. So we raise money from yoga festivals, and then we think the outreach through Burning Man is one of the best way to reach really mindful, culturally significant, paradigm-changing group of people. So we actually fund our camp really from proceeds from other events. We're a total nonprofit. So we're 75 people right on Esplanade. Currently in Bali, I'm trying to establish the first regional burn here. We're calling it Bali Ignite here, the first Indonesian burn. So I'm focused kind of on that here in Bali at the moment. But anyway, you'll hear later in our talk. I'll talk about how we're a nonprofit, how we evolved from one person camp basically all the way to the Esplanade, and strategies for doing that. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thanks. All right. So thanks, Big Bird. Impulse, you want to just give a short intro to what you're going to be talking about today? Oh, I think you might be muted, Impulse. Oh. Cannot hear you, but I don't see that you're muted. Oh, no, I do see that you're muted. There you go. Shall we skip ahead while you
See,
work on
you got
this?
me yet?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Changing computers, changing settings. Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Impulse with Joby Coffee Tea or Me. Joby is the joy of being in. It's the answer to the fear of missing out. We do coffee, tea, hot cocoa every morning on the 9 o'clock plaza, and we love our neighborhood. We love our camp. We love our neighbors. We love our neighborhood. Our hub mates and camp mates are on here right now. And I'm calling in from Northern California. Right now I'm in Oakland. Usually I'm in Cazadero up above the Russian River in the Redwoods. Joby has been a camp since, we started getting placed in 2010. So we were a camp long before that. We've been placed since 2010. I've been going since 2012, and I have been co-lead and benevolent dictator since 2015. We're in the process of changing our camp's leadership style over, getting a legal designation, and last year we took a year off. So I'll talk about that.
Awesome. Awesome. And that's what, we're going to be talking about taking the year off. Thanks so much. Wheatfin, are you in the house? If we could spotlight Wheatfin coming in. Do you see him?
Hopefully
Might be
he's
under Jim Wheaton, regular. I'm not sure if he may not have put the AA in front of his name. All right, well, let's, while we're working on Wheatfin, can we perhaps spotlight Puppy, Fox, and Vesper and hear from them just real briefly?
So I am Puppy. I'm the camp lead at Religious as Fuck. And the three of us are going to be, at the end of the other panelists, we're going to be raising some questions with some struggles that we're having in our camps in terms of transitions, and then have an opportunity to use that as a lab conversation around talking about transition.
Excellent, excellent. Were we able to find Wheatfin? Jim Wheaton would be.
Yeah, I didn't see him on the participant list.
He will be sliding in if there's a problem. I know he was just finishing teaching a class. He teaches First Amendment law. So,
All right. Well, I could just, I can just give a little bit about Wheatfin. Wheatfin is joining us also from Joby, and he's going to be talking about creating a legal entity, whether or not you might want to be looking into creating some type of nonprofit or legal entity for your camp, which is a question that comes up quite a bit. All right, well, thanks very much. So that's our intro to all of our panelists, and we're going to go ahead now and take a deeper dive. So if you could please spotlight perhaps me and Big Bird, Philip, that would be great. And we're going to go ahead and start a deeper dive with you, Big Bird, from I Love Elephants. And so your camp went from a single person camp out in open camping to the Esplanade in a period of how long? 10 years?
Well, yeah, longer than that, probably 14 years since a single man camp. I had caravan camp mystery. Remember the caravan year theme? And we had the camp mystery. Before that, though, we had been funded for major art. We had the camp I was just a part of, and I learned about the Burning Man ethos was Camp Morovia, and it's Finley Fryer who got funded for the Plastic Chapel. Some of the old timers might remember the Plastic Chapel. It came back 3 times. It was phenomenal work of art. So I was part of that crew. And then Oasis, the Portal. They did another piece that were funded by Burning Man actually back then. The Portal was at the entrance to Center Camp. and we did that. And then those campers, my friends there, got burned out. Talking about how to not burn out. I learned the hard way. They all kind of like went by the wayside and haven't returned. And so that, well, I haven't burned out. I'm totally into this. So then I established my own little camp to meet the themes of the day. That was like the 5th or 6th year I come to Burning Man, and then I formed Camp Caravan Camp Mystery. So we innovated a great misting system that's still used now. It's an awesome misting system. And then after a couple of years of that, it was unplaced. One of my neighbors thought it was so sweet how our camp was what it was all about, right? And he said, you should be placed. And so he introduced me. That was the Mask Man. He introduced me to Level, and Level said, yeah, you should be placed. And so then I became somebody, an entity, So and then I guess I could talk in a little bit about how to grow the camp, but as far as that, like being placed, yeah. So we became placed, and I discovered that that the extent of how I could build as a one-man camp, and I had partners come, a few friends here and there in the earlier years of Camp Mystery. We got placed, and I thought, well, I should bring my passion into Burning Man, not just like create something to fit the theme of Burning Man, but bring my own personal passion I'm fueled. My fire inside within is conservation work, and so I thought, why not put elephants, my day job, tie it in, and so that's when then I think Level and KGB and all these placement people saw that what we were bringing. It wasn't like it wasn't like another rave and happy hour camp. We're bringing like information about, we're bringing yogis in there, A-listers from, some people will recognize some of the names we brought in that are friends of mine from the yoga community, full kirtan band. We brought all these people and made it a real chill vibe, in our camp. And then so I could talk a little bit here about how you maintain the vibe through the population.
Can we just see the slideshow a little bit? So regular, could you show the slides from Big Bird that might help to kind of get a sense of yeah.
There you go. Yeah, me and my Airstream trailer. That camp mystery with me, where I power a misting system, and that was the early years was great. Here is where for 2 years there. You see a couple slides here actually as you go through a couple. I had a great sound system, and I would play Beats Antique out loud, and during build week or whatever. And adjoining campers loved my music, and so they'd come over a block and a half away and dance at my camp, and I made friends that way, right? So with these really cool people, Reverbia was the camp from Canada, and they come and hang out, and then the next year, maybe this is like the second or third year that I was actually like just before I was placed. I asked the placement team, could we be placed together nearby each other? I said, well, we don't usually do that, right? Back then, it's like kind of a random thing. They don't give preference of camps, but they said, in this case, Big Bird, yeah, we'll try to place you next to Reverbia. So then we got placed. Maybe the next slide. We'll show, yeah, there you go. And then another slide, that's the elephant in the background. That's when I switched over to elephant camp. Okay.
So we can see that you're growing quite a bit here.
Yeah, right? That's like the 3rd or 4th year, and there's probably where I'm placed there at D in 430 or something. But I really got into, like, for months ahead of time in my spare time, I built this elephant carousel, and it went round and round, and it drew a lot of attention for people. And at the time I was creating events in Bend, Oregon. I'd have like weekend long painting events, and so there's a little mural in front there of the carousel that was done by a community of like 10 people. And so I started bringing the Burning Man energy into Bend and creating events. We put up a shade structure in the summer in Bend there and do these. So I started incorporating locals in Bend and what we were doing. And thus I started to grow our camp at that point. And you'll see the next slide here. I think we'll show. And then so ultimately, it was Beats Antique that brought me together with some of the most beautiful people. Now, the carousel was stressed quite a bit here with about 1,000 pounds of people. And I was very proud that it held up and didn't fall over. But that's part of the kind of steampunkish feel, which I still feel like want to honor the origin of Burning Man, which I feel is the roots of it is kind of steampunkish and kind of radical, right? So anytime we go off that ethos, I feel like we're we're not grounded in what Burning Man's really about. So I always try to keep that element of the Burning Man, historical Burning Man stuff, not the glossy plastic camps or whatever that we see popping up everywhere. And so that, I think, is why Level and KGB and the different placement team in the 430 sector love us. And so they honored me with putting us forward to, like, C Street, B Street, and then A for a couple of years, and then Esplanade. And they said, it'll take some game, to go there. So the next slide you'll see, I invested. Yeah, we have a drive-by theater, big screen up above there under light sticks, and I commissioned every year. I commission special art, now mostly from Bali. I actually have it painted here by different artists, and I'll transport it to America and put it up on a big scaffold system. And then the drive-by theater, we'd have elephant films showing all the time, and so that this is when we were probably at A Street at this point. And then the next slide, you'll see here. Yeah, so this last year, this last year, we got some dust there. It couldn't be from the year that it was yeah, I think that was last year. So now we occupy almost a whole acre, like 350 feet of frontage, running up 430 and Esplanade, 4 circus tents, and some art in the front there, more painted art on the marquee, and we've topped off at like 75 people, and we used to be like 50 people, and I'll tell you, I grew because another neighboring camp, Reverbia, like 5-6 years earlier, 7 years earlier, they got burnt out. And I bonded with a bunch of their members who weren't burnt out, but the leaders were burnt out. And because they were overtaxed, they weren't, they tried to delegate, but nobody would pay attention, I guess. And they took on so much, and I helped them out wherever I could with tools and machinery and know-how. And the 2 leaders got burnt out, went back to Canada, not to come back to America, to Nevada. And I grabbed all the other the members of the camp. They all contacted me and said, I'm open to you guys. So their camp kind of merged with mine. And we in the vibe, so that we ended up being like 40 or 50 people in our camp, and it was a really sweet spot. And I had many yogis and kirtan musicians, and the yoga teachers were incredible. And that the vibe we had was I mean, I'm not averse to having a few beers here and there, but it's not alcohol fueled. So the vibe is very consistent and very, it's like a nest. People come home to our camp and they just feel this energy of love and connection, community. And we grew up to like 75 people, and I felt that edge was kind of starting to slip. And I curate the camp, and part of the reason why I can curate it is because, well, for one thing, I've paid for all our infrastructure, so I can't, we have a bunch of hippies on our camp, and I love hippie. I'm a hippie, right? So, but I know they can only afford so much. And so there's a breaking point where if you go over a certain camp fee, they just can't do it, So I used to give half price for our camp fee. If they got a low income ticket, I would just automatically have our fee, and I'd make up for it elsewhere. So there's a balance, there. 'Cause I would lose the most, beautiful people if I went over a certain number. So so I have to have a few more people than 50 to be able to offset those that are poor, that aren't economically rich or whatever. So and I found this slip when I got 75 people. So I've come back to like 50 people. I'm not, I'm not able to allocate funds to reimburse me for infrastructure. Over the years I've been able to, and a lot of the camps at Esplanade, you'll recognize they have benefactors. People that just have excess money, and they're gifting to the camp, which is beautiful, right? And I guess I'm the benefactor of my own camp, and I accept that role because that primary work is in elephant conservation, and so I feel this is a way to connect to the larger universe and the crowd I want, the burners, to be involved and see what we're doing. So it's a good investment from my personal point of view, and but there's a balance between how many people, how we can charge them, and the size, and then we have to deliver on the playa. Like I want to be on Esplanade, you have to deliver game. So, and every year you have to change something. You have to evolve in a way where, like, we brought some laser lights. We brought all kinds of LED lights. Every ridge line of every tent has illumination. our light sticks have to go higher. We need larger marquee. All these things every year. And I don't want to be bored by my camp. I don't want other people to be bored by it. And so that's kind of how the evolution of our camp has been.
All right, let me just interrupt for a moment, just to with a couple of questions. Oftentimes people talk about the size of the camp, and you did have a point about kind of what your sweet spot is. And oops, that's not so if we can take the slides down now, that might be
I like the
good.
rainbow though.
Yeah. Finding that sweet spot in the size of your camp. So as you evolved from a smaller camp to a larger camp, going up to 75, back down to 50, your point of how much you charge people. But do you find that there's a sweet spot for the number of people in the camp? And then how do you control that growth?
Right. It's so critical. Like when you're at that size, you have to have a balance between builders and then performers or presenters. And like we host like 50 to 70 workshops in our camp amongst the four tents. And so, I mean, I can make contact with these presenters months ahead of time. And there are many presenters that want to be in our camp. And it's like, well, I can't pull it off in different ways. So often they need a discount, when you're with your day job is being a yoga teacher, the income level is really low, so I have to kind of fund them, subsidize them. But so we need to somehow find a balance between those presenters that we want in our camp so bad. There's the presenters that want to be in our camp so bad that we can't we don't have space for them. Those that we want to have in camp that we have to subsidize. And then there's the builders. It takes 25 people 5 days to build my camp. 25 people 5 days is huge. And there are certain members of the build crew that are critical for us to achieve our goals. Otherwise, I have to work too hard. But, in the old days, I found that the threshold that I only a certain bandwidth, and at one point in time, it's like, I need help. Like I built a big camp. My neighbor's like, I can't believe you did that by yourself or with one friend. And then it's like, okay, we have to start bringing builders in. So there's a balance. And you can't lose critical people. Those builders are so essential. Like one person will be in charge of the whole marquee, 2-3 days to build that thing, and they're experienced at it. And I have to make sure that they are motivated to come and inspired. And part of that goal is that, well, sometimes you have to give them a break on a camp fee, sometimes even a free ticket or whatever. But they're super critical, to our camp. And what you have to present to them is the opportunity to express themselves fully. And I've been told this, that they love our camp because I allow them to express themselves. And some of them, they don't have any opportunity in a default world to build and to relate to people and lead crews and all these things that they do on our camp. And so I recognize that and then give them free reign, do how you will, construct it how you will. If you can optimize something, make something better, whatever, give ideas. So even in the off season, I let them have a say. And that's the way that we don't lose those core people. So they continue to come in. And then like some kids from Crested Butte, Colorado, a group of 3 or 4, during the mud apocalypse or whatever, when people were coming in front of our camp and they improvised, they had a joke contest. And so we saw people on a track right in front of our camp and say, we want to hear your best joke. And we had a microphone there and they'd tell a joke, and we had like 100 people there and improvised,
Wow.
and during the mud burn, I mean, it's phenomenal. And I said, okay, next year we're going to make it official. We're going to do a joke contest. We're going to set up a stage, build a stage for you guys special. And and they were so excited, right? So I pulled them in now, and they're great builders. I had to find something, for them to really be, thriving within, And so incredible boys, the Crested Butte work ethic, there's a certain thing about living in the high mountains, and they have it. And that's where I came of age.
So we need to just wrap up this section now because we're needing to move on. But just wanted to say it sounds like, the passion that you have and the support that you have for your camp has really been one of the ways to have it expand. And we haven't had a chance, but we will perhaps in the Q&A to talk a little bit more about how your passion has actually extended outside of your camp into your year-round efforts, which I think were also listed in your bio there. But we're going to change gears now. So I appreciate all of your information and your passion. And we are going to switch gears now and move on to our next speaker, panelist, who is Impulse. So Impulse, if regular, if you can, bring Impulse into the conversation. And maybe at the end of Impulse's talk, we can talk a little bit about the year-round efforts that both your camp and I Love Elephants has been engaged in. But Impulse, so Impulse, your camp took 2024 off, if I understand correctly, right?
We did. We did, and we are huge fans of it. If we could maybe put the slide deck up with it. I've got on it. Thanks, Rob. All right. So should your Burning Man camp take a year off? Should you, for all kinds of reasons, take a year off? We did, and we've been talking about it for quite a while. Joby has been a long-term camp. We've been around for quite a while. We're in our third, moving into our fourth iteration of what we are as a camp. And we love each other deeply, and we love our neighbors, and we love our neighborhood. And so there's a real draw for us to go. And then in 2023, the year of the Mudpocalypse, we also brought out this art project, Field of Flowers. And I'll just say, if you haven't done a large art project with a very small group of people, it will eat your life. It's such a luxury to make art with your friends, and yet it's a lot. So we did take a year off. We've been talking for quite a while about the opportunity to take a year off or to come every other year camps. But we took last year and we're coming back this year. Next slide. And next, because it'll add some pictures. Yeah. And then there we go, one more. All right. So on a normal year, Joby we're 25-ish people. We run 25-ish people a year is our happy spot. We do coffee, tea, and hot cocoa every morning. We serve hundreds of gallons of coffee, tea, hot cocoa, milks to go with them, all the things that go with it. We build a whole cafe with a seating lounge. And our goal when we're out there is to do what we do really well, and to just nail it. And then if we do extra stuff around that, that's kind of bonus, that's gravy on top of it. But we want to nail it, and we want to be a good camp. We want to be a good neighbor. And that means building our pergola and bringing out couches and building through, hard times. And you can see on one of these is our bike trailer, and on the other is our bike trailer being towed home. So a typical Burning Man year does all the things that we all as TCOs know. It is wonderful, it's delightful, it's joyful, it's hard. Some years we don't leave our camp. But then next slide. Add those. You can leave and you can come back. And a year off of Burning Man this last year, we'd been having the discussion, and we'd had it in various ways. For our camp, it is really important that we stay close, that we stay connected, and Burning Man gives us a focal point. But we realized we could have other focal points. And you can see here, we do an annual retreat. We did Unscrews, our regional. My partner and I kayaked in 7 different states. And although we're changing it over, because he and I were the primary leads in our camp, we have a terrific group. We know who can do what. We had a tertiary lead as well, but we were the primary leads. And last year I had cancer. And then I had appendicitis. And being able to take a year off, especially if you're smaller camps, in the years when something else is happening and you don't have that additional stress of what it looks like to try to do all the stuff, is huge. It's a huge piece to add in. So we had talked for years about, we call it the we call it the castle plan in our camp. What if, for the time, money, energy that we put into Burning Man, we rented a castle for a week and we drank really good wine and we, ran around in castle costumes and, did all that type of stuff. So this year we didn't rent a castle, but we did rent a giant house on the coast in Oregon. And we went up and we co-worked for a week. Those of us who needed to work, worked. When we worked. When we didn't work, we kayaked or hiked or went to the beach or played with other people's dogs. So it's a really important part to have that opportunity. And also, there are so many camps that would be great that want to come in to Burning Man. And if maybe we rotate out every once in a while, somebody else gets a chance and does something amazing. Next slide.
Yeah, one question as we're transitioning is that many people have is how do you manage the dealing with the storage and supplies and stuff while you're taking the year off? So that logistical
Yeah.
part.
I'll get to that because that is in my part here.
Okay, good.
As a lead, are you burnt out? Are there times you're not looking forward to it? Remember that joy that when you first went, or when you could pull it off, and it was amazing that it could happen. And then there are years. I'm sorry for those of you who are new. This is just a heads up that it is part of the cycle. You will get to a point where you're like, oh my, I'm frustrated with all of you. I'm frustrated with me. I'm frustrated with the process. I haven't slept enough. It's not this year there are too many meetings. Taking a year off for self-care for yourself as a TCO or for your camp is huge. It makes the difference in the burnout rate. And one of the things that I do is I get to help support organizing the camp mentorship program. And I have great partners that I work with on that. And one of the things we hear from longer term camps is the burnout, the organizational burnout, the fundraising burnout, the details burnout. And so just, prompting in there, if you're feeling burnout, maybe not this year if you're not on it, but maybe start thinking about what it would look like for you. Next slide. So yes, that one. Benefits of a break, taking it off to recharge, giving space to these new camps, but also like doing other things with your people. I'm a huge fan. If you are a camp that is looking to be long-term, that is looking to do things, if you're small enough, do things with your people. We did things with our people. We did things with our neighbors. We've stayed in touch with our hub camp. They're on here. Hi, guys. And finding a way to do that. And then next slide. And we can do it because there are no negative impacts. We took a year off and placement has worked this out for us. We retain our standing, we retain our tickets. We, all of that is still there. It's paused and it's still there. And then next slide. So the considerations, I should have made these a little larger, but the considerations, is that what you were talking about, PETA? If you're not a closed camp, do you lose connectivity? If you have a lot of materials, how do you fund the ongoing cost of your materials? But if you think about it, like if you're only going to Burning Man to keep funding the stuff you have to go to Burning Man, that loop kept going in my brain. And, if you're a camp that has to recruit every year, it might kind of break the cycle you've got going. Some of our other friend camps that took a year off aren't going to come back or aren't going to come back soon. They took the year off and realized that it's not their thing now, but that opens up space for more people. So for us, we worked at this as a group. There has been, the fundraising isn't, the fund planning isn't spectacular. We're a small camp of about 25. We have very much of a sliding dues because our people run from 20 years old this next year to 68. We often have people coming from a couple countries. We have people who are in, who are still in school. We have people who are, transitioning jobs, all those things. So it's not that our people are wealthy and can fund it without thinking about it. But what it means, especially after, we went to Mudpocalypse, we took the year off. We lost a lot of our gear in the mud, or it got killed by the mud. So this year we have to not only cover the costs for our gear being held out there, for our storage, and redoing what we're, all of our pillows and our fluff pieces and such. We're going to have to run a couple of bigger fundraisers. We are going to find ways outside of charging our people. We're going to, we're kind of come up with options, but you really do have to think about what the ongoing costs are. And maybe for us, if we're going to do it again, we'll start building it into our budgets. If we were going to do it every other year, we would build the off year into our budgets. And then next slide. Oop, other way. Yes, that one. Coming back after a break. There was Mudpocalypse. We took last year off. We did a bunch of other stuff. This year, we just had our camp retreat. We all go up to a cabin. We have a giant slumber party. We get a little bit weird, but we also have a meeting where we talk about it. And one of the things that happened with taking the year off and with going all through this is the realization that we both need a legal structure, which my partner is going to talk about, because the cobbler's children have no shoes in this case. He teaches other camps to do it, but we haven't done it. And we need to expand our leadership and slowly start turning it over to new blood. Any good organization should have new blood coming into its leadership regularly so that you don't go stagnant and so that you don't get too burnt out. But taking the year off gave us a really good opportunity to be like, all right, who is it? And to open up our brains to the people who had offered and to tap a couple of people. We've got amazing people. I'm sure all of your camps have some amazing people. So that's what coming back looks like for us, is starting to move those of us who have been in leadership for a while back out into the summer camp version, where we want to just go play when we're out there, and we'll support, but we don't have to be the primary anymore.
Thank you so much. That's great. And it's a great segue when you talked about how you got together and were discussing about what kind of entity that you would like to create, being that our next panelist is going to be talking about the possibility and giving information about creating a legal entity for your camp. So we welcome Wheat Thin, calling in from a cafe, it looks like.
Yep.
So hello. Welcome.
Hello. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. Some trouble with the Wi-Fi here, but I got it fixed.
Nice. We got a little bit of background noise, but I think we're going to be
There's nothing I
okay.
can do about that.
All right. So, Wheathen, do you want us to open up your slide presentation?
If you would, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. So regular, if you can open up the slide presentation.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I was asked to give a brief talk on the questions you want to ask yourself if you want to become a legal entity instead of just a group of people who goes out. What are the problems you're trying to solve? And then give you a very brief overview of what the different choices are for a legal entity. So this is actually from my first full day in my first camp at my first Burning Man. My God, if there could be a double rainbow every day, it really is a magical place. Next slide, please.
Next slide.
Here we go. So if you're thinking about putting your burning camp in a legal entity, I always ask people when they come to talk to me about that, what are the things that you're trying to protect or you're trying to solve? And the 5 that come back over and over again are, first of all, leadership. How does your camp choose who leads it? Do you have a process for changing who your leads are? And how would you address conflict if two different people or groups of people claim to be the leads? This is one of the major things that I've seen that makes camps implode. So a legal entity solves those questions. By definition, you'll have to have some kind of person who is the legal entity's leader. There will be succession problems solved in there, and there by definition it will take away the conflict or give you a way to resolve the conflict by having some kind of leadership succession in place in writing. Second, membership. Who's in your camp? How do they get there? Who can come into the camp? Who has the power to invite someone into the camp? Who has the power to remove someone from the camp? And how do you deal with former camp members who now want to come back? And that can present problems if your camp has changed and they're no longer a good fit. So having a legal entity, you can write all that down about membership. Third one is gear. Ownership of the gear is often very ambiguous in camps, especially the informal ones. Who has the power to control the gear? And that could be different than the ownership. I know one camp that imploded because one person felt they were the owner of the gear. Another person rented the storage container and said, now it's mine. And they fought back and forth and the camp completely imploded. A third issue on gear, of course, is who's responsible for repairing and maintaining and replacing it all. And the last one I've seen that's caused conflict within camps is when people want to use the gear off playa at other events and so forth. Who has the authority to let people borrow gear? Or is it limited to members? Again, you can answer these questions. The fourth one is money. Money. Having a legal entity allows you to have a bank or a credit card that's separate from the individuals in the camp. Most camps that are just informal, one person will run the whole camp thing through their own bank account. Or there'll be several people handling money, some people for gear, some people for tickets and so forth. And that can get messy. A credit card, again, you can have one person's credit card, but then it all landing on one person. Having a credit card that goes back to the entity allows people to avoid going into any kind of debt. The last thing about money you should all know is at some point the IRS is going to start implementing their rules that will require e-payment platforms like Venmo and PayPal and so forth to start reporting anybody who receives more than $600 in a year. And they'll report that to the IRS, and the IRS very well may take that as income to the person who receives the money. So if you're a camp lead and you're getting all the camp dues and then paying out, the IRS is very likely to treat that as income to you, and they're going to require you to pay taxes on it. So you want to get that off of there and have the e-payments, if they occur, go to the entity.
Okay, Within, can I just interrupt? You've got a lot of background noise there. Is there any way that you could move in a different, it just, every time you speak, there's a lot of reverberation.
There. Okay. Here, follow me.
Oh, yeah. Let's have a tour through the coffee shop.
Yeah, this is going to be
Thank
much
you
better. Yeah, just walking away. Yeah, I was sitting by the pool table, and that was perfect until some people came along and started playing pool. Okay.
There we go. Yeah, thank you. So I didn't want to interrupt while you were speaking, but yeah, please
Appreciate it.
continue.
And then the last thing is insurance. It's very difficult for an individual to get insurance for an unincorporated association of people who just get together and go to a party, as opposed to an entity. Next slide.
Next slide.
The line pizza, please. Large fries, the line pizza, please.
So the choices of your entity are really 5. Let's start with a nonprofit corporation. A lot of people, when they come and talk to me about this, they just default to, oh, I should have a 501c3. I'm here to tell you, no, you probably shouldn't. The principal benefits of a 501c3 are donations to it are deductible by the giver, and you can apply for foundation grants and government grants. And maybe you're also exempt from things like sales taxes. Those are rarely the issues that people are concerned with if they're running a camp and want to go and become a legal entity. So there are, by the way, 28 different kinds of nonprofit corporations under Internal Revenue Code Section 501c. You can be all kinds of things. And the 501c3 is only for charitable, charitable nonprofit corporations. It is the hardest kind of nonprofit status to get. It takes a long time.
181.
There's a lot of paperwork. It can take up to a year. And then there will be reporting requirements, including tax forms, even for a nonprofit corporation, that have to get filed every year. So you're taking on quite a load for no apparent benefit. You can get other kinds of nonprofits if that's the way you want to go. Second one is a limited liability corporation. This is a for-profit entity composed of individuals who invest. They place some amount of money into the LLC, and then there'll be voting, usually for the shares. And it can be infinitely expanded. It's very flexible, but there are still reporting requirements. But it will have a defined leadership. It'll have defined members who buy shares, and a defined voting pattern for handling things. And it generally has a general manager who, of course, your camp lead. But that person's defined and they can't be removed except by the investors. A partnership is a group of people who get together to create something outside of themselves to operate something, whether it's a bakery or a law firm. Also pretty flexible, but partnerships are can get very difficult and fractious. They tend not to have a leader unless there is a single partner who's elected. But they are famous for having fights and having conflict, and eventually it can get difficult. It's also hard to bring in somebody into a partnership just as a member who's just going to come to a camp for 1 year. And then how do you get rid of them? You'll have to create limited partnerships. It's creating a lot of paperwork. The other thing about a partnership is the liability is not limited to the assets of the corporation. All of the partners are all liable for anything that goes wrong. Fourth, fiscal sponsorship. You're a small camp. You don't want to go through all that trouble and all that paperwork, but you want to have some protection. There's something called a fiscal sponsorship, very, very common in the nonprofit world, in which you go find somebody who's already gone through all of that, and they simply sponsor you. You become a project of them. They'll handle the money, they'll handle all the paperwork, and then they usually take a percentage of the gross revenue to do that. That's something you might want to think about if you just do not want the hassle of any kind of formal corporate or partnership. The thing about all four of those is all of them mean that your camp is now becoming part of the state, that you're inviting the state into the running of your camp at some level. You know, even a nonprofit 501c3 has to file a very lengthy tax return describing where the money came from, where it went, who got paid, and so forth. And you have to report all that to the government. It becomes public. The fifth alternative then is simply to create your own. Rather than essentially borrowing the pre-made structures and running and reporting and financial things that just come with being a corporation or being an LLC or partnership, you instead sit down, talk amongst your camp, and you come up with written agreements to solve all of the issues that were outlined in the first slide. What's our succession plan? How does someone become lead? Who becomes a member? What does membership get you? Who can remove a member? All those issues can be handled by simply creating written agreements that everybody signs on to simply by becoming a member. It's very flexible. You can change it at any time. And I'm going to tell you that is what our camp is probably going to do. The other four don't solve any problems for us that we need an entity for. But by creating it and giving it a written agreement, we'll have all of these issues and the potential conflicts worked out before the conflict arrives. The downside is you're not a separate entity. So if you need the protection of a separate entity for any of the reasons I described, you can do that. You can, of course, get a separate bank account and just call it My Camp and just run all the money through that. That helps a lot. Not going to help with the IRS. But those are the 5 different choices from the most formal to the least formal. Okay, that's it.
That's great. We then put together a document. I know this is a lot of information to be kind of trying to digest in this very short time. So Brady Cat, if you could post that one more time, perhaps the document that we then put together that goes in a little bit more deeply explaining what we then has just explained. Yeah, so there it is in the chat, and it's a super helpful document. And I really appreciate you putting it together and having the legal background to know what, what's legal and what's not legal. And I think too, your comment, and as we've all known about this pending kind of doom of the IRS looking at the money that we are collecting from our campmates to pay for water and stuff like that, and how that may be affecting us. So thank you very much, Wheat Thin.
Pleasure. Actually, could you put up that last slide that was there? I forgot.
Yeah, sure.
I gave you a sixth alternative, which is do nothing.
Ah,
There you go. So don't do anything and just expect or plan that there'll be smooth sailing, there'll never be a conflict, easy transitions. All your understandings will be unspoken and yet known to all. And besides, it's Burning Man. What's the worst that could happen? It's fine.
excellent. Nice finale. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Wheat Thin. Awesome.
Thank you.
Right. All right. So let's go on to our next topic and group of people here. We're going to be discussing with Puppy, Vesper, and Fox. So if we could have those people spotlit on the screen, that would be fantastic. And they are Camp Network members, and interestingly, all three of them have been experiencing some type of transition in their camps. So I'm just going to go ahead and let you guys take it away. I think we're going to be starting with Vesper, right? I understand that in the past you had a camp divorce. And I wanted to know if you could share a little bit more about your camp divorce and what you learned from that experience.
Absolutely. And interestingly, the camp that I started going with when I first started going to Burning Man had also been through a change in how we did our interactivity because we had a change in our participants. The camp that I had been with before had for years had a lot of really outgoing, extroverted, really fun, cool people who did some performance art as their interactivity. And then over the years, the camp membership changed, and we found ourselves in a year where the majority of us who were going identified as introverted people who didn't feel so comfortable putting ourselves out there in that really extreme way in the performance art that had been done for years in the past. So we decided to, collectively, we talked it over about what we would like to do instead. And we decided to start a pop-up bar at our camp. And started bringing that and found it to be really successful. That kind of, unfortunately, got the wheels turning with myself and my partner about what we might want to do ourselves for building something really amazing. And through experiencing our growth as burners over probably 7, 8, 9 years of going to Burning Man, we decided that we really wanted to take this idea that we had and run with it in the way that we wanted to execute it, kind of without having to execute our idea by committee. with the camp. I know, particularly thinking about our last campfire talk about leadership styles, we definitely wanted to be the dictators of our idea. So we decided to split off from our camp and start a new camp ourselves to execute this idea that we had had. Our camp divorce was amicable. It was not a literal default world divorce. We had some hard conversations with our former camp lead, and had a really, of the three of us, like a really amicable split. And, right down to splitting up infrastructure. And then continue to like camp in the same village with our new camp and our old camp in the same place, and support each other's events and move on. And now in our new camp, we are starting to have some other thoughts around what do we want to do and where is this going to go next. I think feeling a lot of really common things that Impulse was talking about. So.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really strikes me about this is just sometimes we just need to change. Or like you're saying, the people who had that particular activity in your camp moved on, or what happens, but then sometimes we feel like we're stuck in this place. So congratulations for taking the move and doing what you needed to do to keep vibrant.
Yeah, and now here we find ourselves in a similar place after bringing this amazing bar and experience for a couple of years, maybe not wanting to work so hard for a year to like allow the excitement to build back up a little bit more again. And who knows what kind of ideas will come to the fore either in the next 6 or 8 months or in the next year and 8 months.
Yeah, and again, back to what Impulse was saying about remembering that excitement and that spark, that first cycle of our camp, when we're feeling pretty excited, or we just keep iterating and changing a little bit, like we saw with I Love Elephants and how they just continue to evolve, and how do we keep that spark alive and not burn out and. Yeah. Yeah. And Puppy, you were talking too about kind of a transition similar to Vespers around kind of a new inspiration that you have for a camp while still loving the camp that you're running. So you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, thank you, Peta. So I and a couple friends founded Religious as Fuck in 2018, and it's a camp of clergy and non-clergy, but Christians and even some non-Christians. But the energy around the camp was we fell in love with the ethos of Burning Man, and we wanted to be able to bring our faith there and kind of create, the clergy that are there with us are kind of burned out from the judginess and the commodification of church in the default world. And we wanted to have a place where we could bring our faith and connect with other burners or help people that have been traumatized by toxic church, etc. So it is a camp with a really specific mission. And because and I love it and it's thriving, but because I'm a veteran, a lot of the people I'm talking with are also veterans. We have a lot of veterans in our camp. And I have this idea around creating a camp for veterans and inviting them into the healing world of Burning Man and creating this space where veterans and non-veterans could be together and civilians can learn about the veteran world and all of that. And it wouldn't be a hard camp. We've got some simple interactivity we could start with. My struggle is like I'm devoted and committed to my camp. And so are all the other people there, but we have this vision that is starting to bubble up. And I'm just at the phase of talking about the vision a lot and getting people excited, but we're not quite sure how to make, like, what the next step is. And I'm not sure if I'm ready to leave, religious as fuck. And it's just sort of this internal struggle and struggle with, like, how do we do both or not, or do the transition? That's what we're wrestling with. So it's mostly questions more than anything else.
Yeah, and I invite our participants, if you guys have any thoughts around this conundrum a bit that Puppy is experiencing. If you have any ideas or thoughts to share, we'd love to hear them. So please write them in the chat. One of the things about what you're talking about is if you split off, then there's going to need to be another lead of religious as fuck, right? So you're also needing to think about leadership succession along with that, because you've created this wonderful thing that you've been doing. So I was just going to segue there to Fox, who's also struggling a little bit with this idea of leadership succession, or maybe not struggling, but moving along with it, transitioning and evolving. So any thoughts that you want to add or talk about Fox in this time?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit about my camp, Whiskey and Dust. We've been around since 2009. We're a whiskey bar with a habitual yoga problem. We like to joke, but we also have like other services and gifts as well. I've been a TCO support, a co-TCO, and a single TCO since 2012. And definitely my camp's gone through several transformations, whether they were really small. We were a village at 250, and now we're about a medium-sized camp. So now I am stepping down from a leadership role, and I'm focusing on what that succession planning looks like, what that means for the camp and its future. And I'm looking at developing a structured transition plan, formalizing organizational challenges and changes, and establishing a board to allow longstanding members to take a step back while welcoming new leadership. So right now, what I'm doing is researching on how other camps are doing it, and I'm asking how camps handle succession planning and what framework do they use.
Great. And so again, this part of our campfire talk, we were looking to open it up to the participants as well to put their feedback in the chat. So if you have had some good leadership transition experiences that you think would be helpful for the community to hear or to read in this case, or if you have some ideas, again, what Puppy was talking about, what happens when you love your camp, but you want to kind of branch off and do something different. So again, please, if you have any ideas, please post those ideas in the chat. Is there anything else that the three of you would like to say? Go ahead, Vesper, yes?
Yeah, when we were getting together to talk about this, I thought it was really interesting that even though all three of us have camps of very different sizes, we are all working through various angles of kind of the same idea. Box's camp has between 60, 65, 70, 75 people. Puppy's camp has about 20. And our previous camp was usually about 10. And our current camp is usually like between 8 and 10. I think on the one side, for things like what Weethan was talking about or what Fox is going through, when you have a lot more people, it can get a lot more complicated. Like to some extent, with a really small camp, it was like, cool, I'm just going to take my tent and go over here and do my thing. And there was a little bit of freedom in that. One of the things that we discovered as we started to execute the idea that spurred the creation of our current camp was that we needed more people than just the two of us to make it happen. And it turns out that, when you talk about Burning Man to your friends all the time, sometimes they really want to go with you. And if you can convince them to hang out in your camp with you for, several years in a row, maybe you can get them on board with this cool idea that you're doing. But then it almost starts to get to a place where, like what Puppy is experiencing, where you kind of feel bad about wanting to leave this group of people to maybe do something different. And it's not necessarily about, like, I want to be clear that like what happened with our camp divorce, or like what Puppy might be going through, is not about, oh, we have a problem and so we need to split up. I think it might actually be easier if it's, oh, we have a problem and now we have to dissolve. That it's harder to say, I love you, but I also really need to go over and try this new thing.
And that's what Burning Man's about. I think it's continually expressing our creativity and going to those uncomfortable spots,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Whether there's conflict or no conflict at all. Yeah. So we've gotten some good chat information here. So thanks for contributing, participants, our wonderful participants here, to contributing to the chat. So now we can move on to our Q&A section. So we've had a few questions in the chat. If you have any other questions, you can put them in the chat. And we also had some questions from our registrants. When you registered, you had a opportunity to put a question in. So we're going to just open up these questions to everybody, all of the panelists. And you guys can just raise your hand as panelists, or just chime in if you feel like you have an answer to the question. The one question I would just like to circle back with Big Bird, because I felt like we had to kind of move on from when you were talking, is Big Bird, can you just talk about, just briefly, how did you go from, you talked a little bit because it's your passion about with elephants, but how did you go from being your Burning Man camp to something that happens year round?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the question. Yeah. So I think, okay, a lot of the infrastructure we have, how I've learned to be able to afford it in the long run and add to our infrastructure is I found a niche that I can use the equipment off-site year round. So the tents and all. So I started getting free space at Bhakti and Shakti Festival, Beloved, all these great festivals in the Pacific Northwest, mostly in the Joshua Tree. And they gave me space to present about elephants if I provided tents, infrastructure a little bit. And then later, but they started renting tents from me then. So we grew. I was able to afford more tents to bring to my camp that were kind of funded from my other work. And the niche is that when festivals rent tents, they have to pay like say $6,000 or $7,000 for a 3,000 square foot tent. We come in with some of our tents and for like $2,000, and then we use volunteer labor. It's the model we use at Burning Man. It's all volunteer. So I have a crew for several summers. A crew would come with me traveling to different festivals with our trucks. So we have a couple diesel trucks and trailers, and the festival organizers love it because they can utilize their volunteers and pay only a third of their costs for the infrastructure for the festivals. And so we were able to expand our Burning Man camp the infrastructure through kind of the funding that I did on the side. I paid for all this, probably $50,000 worth of tents and things, but we're able to expand and have the Burning Man vibe in my crew every summer. I'd have 5 or 6 people come with me all summer long. So what's so cool during COVID times, we created what we call Phoenix Farm. I rented 10 acres outside Bend, and everybody was locked down, right? First summer of COVID. I set up our tents in this big, safely. I'll tell you how I did it. We had a big collapsed lava tube that's huge at this farm, and we set up several of my tents and put vinyl floor outside the tents so people could dance with 10 feet spacing and distancing, and people who were in their own bubble live together could dance in the tents. But all summer, every Tuesday, we had a static dance, we had yoga, with all these things safely done, and so we called it 24/7 Burning Man. Eventually we hosted fire refugees. We had big fires in Oregon that year, and people lost their home, and they came and camped, and we offered them. So we created a commune as a COVID commune of people that lost their homes, and they set up tents on our acreage and created a whole community. That was actually the first year of summer of COVID.
Great.
Okay, yeah. And now, okay, in Bali, where I'm at, we're creating the first regional. I briefly talked about that earlier, and it's so tough because people want to sponsor us, but of course, like Emirates Airlines will fly people in here for free, presenters, TED Talk people, but they need their name broadcast somewhere. It's like, so I'm constantly telling people, no, it's non-commodification. And it's always like the battle because people can't wrap their head around the principle of Burning Man, non-commodification. So it's an education thing I do everywhere here with the most brilliant festival producers here that I've hooked up with, and I won't name names, but some pretty high level people at Burning Man.
All right.
Okay. And I want to add one more for Wheatbin. One more point. Okay, we're a 501c3. And as long as
can you mute? Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Wheatbin. So we're like 12, 13 years old, 501c3. And as long as the gross is under $50,000 a year, all we have to do is we just have to submit a little postcard. A little postcard. It's really a simple thing. As long as our gross for 501c3 is under that, and the 501c3 comes from our conservation work, and the fundraising is from the festivals that go into our work. But as long as it stays, and we're right on the cusp of over $50,000, but there's ways around that. But then it's not very burdensome. Maybe Wheatbin has a point to make.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And what you describe is a little bit of a hybrid in that you have an off-playa reason for having a 501c3 because of the fundraising and the charitable activity you do. And you absolutely should do that. Those are the benefits that a 501c3 gets you, is to do that work. I'm talking solely about a camp that exists just to come to the event every year. And that one, I don't see a need for a 501c3, that's all.
Great. Thanks for that clarity. Thanks, Big Bird, and thanks, Wheatbin. Brady Cat, would you like to just let us know a question that we might be able to ask our panelists?
So this was I guess, directed towards Big Bird, but it could be anyone. How likely is reducing the number of camp members going to reduce the amount of work for our leadership team to run the camp, considering that we are going to be setting up pretty much the same infrastructure, regardless of the amount of people we have?
Okay, so the question was for me. How there's that sweet balance. Do you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's always so difficult. Like, we have Ram Dass Foundation come into our camp this year, and all these devotees of Ram Dass of this foundation want to come. And it's like, well, can they build? Like, put up pitch a tent, do all these things. But so it's impossible. If we go over 75 people, I feel we're going to fail. And why I do it, like somebody else here mentioned today, that they live. The camp is their art. Like, I feel that my camp is my art. I don't need to go off. I've seen everything at Burning Man over 23 years. And the art is wonderful. I'll ride around my bike and whatever, but I come back to because that's my art. And if I let it go out of control and go chaos, then my art is chaotic. And so cultivating the right vibe is essential. And there's always a balance. And if you don't have those builders, very few will do the building, and they get so burnt out they will not return the next year. So you really need like almost half and half. Like, so we have 25 builders, and then the partners and others that might be presenters, and then so it's a fine line. And we invite friends to invite friends, but we vet them. So we usually let friends invite friends in the past, but now our friends have a lot of friends and have friends, and so it's very difficult. But and I have a crew of 2 or 3 co-leads that we discuss who can do what and what our needs are. We've organized. We have shared sheets. We organize everything tightly. It's not all on my shoulders.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that.
Okay. This one was directed towards Impulse. How has it been working? And I'm sure you've just started working for theme camps who've taken a year off to return without disruptions. Like, how hard has it been on a scale of 1 to 10 to restart that engine?
So it was fairly easy, because we are a year-round camp. We consider ourselves a community. And so for us, it was fairly easy in that, like, we just had our retreat and our happy spot is 25, and we are at about 25 people who want to come this year. So we know each other really well. Anybody who's a new person coming in, we have a whole acculturation process, so we know who can do what, we know who's in charge of what. And it was really easy to be like, great, we're probably going to need to get new rugs. McKenna's on that. Chuck will look at our lights and, just kind of, we knew who does what. And because we know each other really well and we know what each other can and can't do and what we can and can't expect or ask of each other, and we also have the right to say no to each other, it was fairly easy.
And this one was for Puppy, Vesper, and Fox. If there are a number of people leading, can it be harder to address issues because of too many cooks in the kitchen?
Yes. And it also doesn't matter, I think proportionally. As a camp with 8 campers and 2 co-leads, sometimes even just my partner and I are too many cooks in the kitchen. But Fox has a really interesting leadership structure. I wonder, Fox, could you tell us a little bit more about that and how that works?
Yeah, well, with my leadership structure, originally, the previous camp leader was more of a dictatorship. And then under mine, we've transitioned into more of a group discussion. And so if you show up to camp meetings, you have a voice in what our decision making is, whether it's the budget or other aspects. So there's a discussion point on that. And it's led to some interesting discussions because people have conflicting ideas on it. And so just talking it through and figuring out what that looks like. That's what works for us so far.
Perfect.
And
Oh, go for it.
yeah, I was just going to say, in our camp, we invite pretty much anyone who's come more than 1 year, who's shown a real significant interest in our mission into the leadership team. And so we've got a pretty flat and big, leadership team for the size of the camp. And we work pretty well on consensus. So it's worked for us so far, but we're a fairly new camp and we haven't run into issues of conflict that have, that I know are, I'm still on the what could possibly go wrong. We're a Burning Man camp stage of our evolution. And I'm starting to realize in this talk that it might be time for us to write some things down and get some rules. So thank you for that, Wheat Thin.
Anyone else want to answer, or shall I move on? Okay. This is for all the camp. Anyone here? Have any of you considered having a separate build crew from a strike crew to prevent burnout?
Do. Our people have to build and or strike, but our strike team does not have to stay, or our build team does not have to stay for strike. Some of them may stay through. But our people run into their 70s and having to build and strike and try to play as hard as we can in the meantime to have all the fun. Doesn't work for everyone. We also have people with various disabilities or with other physical, mental limitations. And so we want to make it possible.
I'll add something here that we had people disappearing on us before looping time. And so we decided to put a looping deposit that people had to pay $200. They lose if they left before Monday, like 2:00. But we never actually implemented it and charged anybody. Just put the emphasis on our website that's what's expected is every day move. And we, so people, and then every case is different. Like when the build crew kind of are expected to also take down. That they tell us that they have work to go to, we don't hold them to it. We always have enough people to do this strike at the end. But mostly it's the whooping and things. The ones that are more spectator type people than participants are the ones that just show up and then leave and steal away the party without doing the work. And of course, those people won't be returning in the next year. So we're very, very careful about that. But the initiating the $200, because so out of 70 people, I mean, only like 7 or 8 people stayed through Monday a few years ago. It's like, oh my God, the burden was so great for us. And so we just kind of put the fear of God in everybody, like you have to kick $200 in, but ahead of time. But I did send individual messages to everybody and say, don't, you're exempt from that or whatever. So that people were aware, and I wouldn't actually charge that. Back to you.
Perfect. I actually wanted to use some of those responses as a segue for what are you all doing to accommodate aging camp members?
Well, some of us are obviously the aging camp members we're talking about. This year our camp, I think our youngest will be 9 and our oldest will be 68, but we have a few into our 70s. We have people that will now only go to a regional rather than out there. But like any other thing, we try to meet everybody works and everybody pays to the best of their ability. So nobody is a sparkle pony in our camp, but it doesn't mean that everybody does the same thing.
Anyone else want to say anything about that? I just know that it's the change in demographics of our camp, whether we're getting older, the other thing that we have in our camp is everyone is having kids. We're the oldest and everybody else is in their 30s and 40s. And that's really changed the dynamic because it's harder for them to come. And now we're really hoping that one has already started to bring his son. But we're really hoping that as the babies get a little older, that they're going to be able to bring their kids, because otherwise we're going to be losing just some really core people of our camp. So it's kind of that aging, and then also about bringing our kids to the playa, which we're going to be doing a campfire talk on.
Yeah, Peter,
All right.
I want to add something real quick about that. Our camp, we've had people connect in our camp and become married. We've had children conceived in our camp. They come back and like they should name their babies after our camp or something. But it's like so I fear almost when the campers fall in love, because the progression right now is we're losing some core people because they got married and they have new life priorities. So, you have to tell people, no, don't get so close. The intimacy is too much. We need you here, so it's a catch-22. And we've had that, honestly. This year I'm facing with that. A couple of great campers, they totally, oh my God, they fell in love so deeply, and they're core people. And I think they're going to go away this year.
Yeah, what a great problem to have. But yeah, we've had exactly the same thing. Yeah. So Brady Cat, how about just one more question?
Ooh, hard choice.
Do you have one?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now I have to pick. How do you all balance the desire for extroverted personalities who enjoy a lively camp and new people joining versus the more introverted campmates who appreciate a specific vibe?
Yeah, I want to highlight what Impulse said about differing age groups in your camp. There are ways for people to participate to the best of their ability, and that looks different for everyone.
We've had groups that liked to party much harder than the main group of ours, and they split off and became like a friend camp. And we love that for them. Like they come, they visit, and also, we love it for them. They just wanted to party a little bit different than the main part of the camp. Totally support that.
In our camp, we have so many different spaces that introverts can go to the different cuddle space, and other extroverts can go tell jokes in the front or whatever. We have multiple spaces that every personality type will find their little niche to go and hang out. And I think the size of our camp is such that we can, provide that, to everybody. And a lot of people that are introvert want to explore this other side of themselves, did yoga classes and things of introverts. And they have and that's Burning Man, right? You can wear a different hat and experiment and not be, dissed for it or whatever.
And I made the mistake of starting a camp full of spiritual people, and none of them can build, and they're all introverts. And we have a camp whose mission, like a lot of people just pass by and they want to drop in and have conversation. And if we're not doing specific programming, most of the camp would just be in the back house in their little caves. And it's a constant struggle for us to try and, what I'm trying to do is have like meal times, have some thin barrier where we're having our meals. It's obvious that we're not open for business, but if we see someone who's coming by and engaging with, with our frontage, then one of the extroverts can hop up and go engage with them. So we've moved our hangout and meal place from the back tent shade structure to our living room, but to the back end of our living room. And we're trying to sort of make it clear when we're having a meal that, we're not open for our interactivity, but we're ready to engage if someone does pass by and look in.
Great. I love that. I love that. Well, thanks everybody for all of your insights and thoughts. And for our participants, what I really hope is that you learned a few things, that you maybe shared a few things, and maybe you're getting a little curious about some other things. And we really appreciate your coming to our campfire talk. And I want to thank our team, Brady Cat, our chat mod that you heard from, and Regular and Agenda, who are our tech mods today. And then, of course, all of our panelists. So thank you to Vesper, Fox, Puppy, Big Bird, Wheathin, and Impulse. Thanks for participating. Without you, we don't have a campfire talk. And please fill out the feedback form before you head out if you have not done it already. And I think Wheathin's going to be eating some pizza soon, and or someone's eating pizza over there. I just want to give you a heads up about our next campfire talk on February 25th, same time, same channel, 5 p.m. Pacific. And for Green Theme Camp planning, there is a new resource coming out, and we're going to be highlighting that new resource that's going to be available to all camps, and which is going to be focusing on power, waste, water, infrastructure, transportation, and food.
Wow.
And then bringing in some of the contributors to that website and highlighting the ideas that they're most excited about. So this is a project that's been going on for some time, and it's just finally kind of coming to fruition. So that's going to be our focus of our next campfire talk in February. So thanks again, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you next time. Bye.